Hello, this is Mrs. Boots, and we're going to go through the practice problems for dividing exponents. So in problem number 1, remember, we have a monomial over monomial, so we're going to look at things, like things. Looking at our coefficients, we have 15 over 18. Now 15 and 18 are both divisible by what number? That would be 3. So I'm going to get a 5 over a 6. Now let's see what happens with the next term, not term, but piece. The next piece, they're p's. I have 3 p's on top, 2 p's on the bottom. It means I am left with 1 p if I play tug of war, and it's on top. Now let's look at the q's. The q's are next. I have 2 on top, 1 on the bottom. Top one's going to win by 1. This provides our entire answer. Number 2. Always start with the coefficients. Those reduce the same way they always have. What number can I divide into both 27 and 18? Well, that would be 9. So we're going to divide by 9. 27 divided by 9 is 3, and 18 divided by 9 is 2. Now let's look at the next thing. The next thing is an x. I have 3 on top, 4 on the bottom. Play tug of war, bottom wins by 1. Now look at the next thing. Next thing is y's. I have 5 on top, 2 on the bottom. Top wins by 3. Number 3. As we look at this problem, first off, we notice there's a difference. We have 2 fractions. Everything's monomials, but still 2 fractions. Consider this is one big giant fraction, and we just put parentheses around the second term. Okay, so now look at your coefficients. I can reduce 8 because it's divisible by 2, and that goes in 4 times. My 5 will go into 15 3 times. Now let's write what we have. On top, I have a 4. On bottom, I have a 3. Combine some like terms. On top, I notice that I have 2 x's. Remember, when you're multiplying, you do what? You add the exponents. So we would get x cubed with a y, because you can't forget the y. Now on the bottom, we have a y cubed. So we're not done simplifying, because you notice we have a y on both top and bottom. So when we simplify that, I still have 4x cubed over the 3. But now what are we going to do with the y's? How many do we have on the top? Yeah, we have 1 on top, 3 on bottom. So we will end up with a y squared in the denominator. Number 4. I notice I have parentheses with an exponent on the outside. So before I can do any division to simplify, I have to distribute this exponent to everything inside the parentheses. So the first fraction stays the same. P cubed over A. Now my second fraction. I'm going to have 3 squared, which is 9, times A squared over P squared. Okay, now we're ready to simplify. First thing, kind of go alphabetical. We only have one coefficient. That's the 9, and it's on top. So it stays. Now let's look at the p's. 3 on top, 2 on the bottom. Who's going to win? Top's going to win, tug of war by 1. Now look at the a's. I have 1 on bottom and 2 on top. Who's going to win? Well, top's going to win again. So technically there's a 1 on the bottom, so we actually don't even have to write it. So the answer would be 9 P A. Number 5. This is more of a multiply problem, right? Because I have parentheses to a power. When we distribute the power, the x squared becomes x to the 4th, and the 9 squared, becomes 81. The parentheses are now gone. There's no division that we can do to simplify that problem. Number 6. I do have fractions and I can divide and simplify. But before I do, I have to distribute the square. The square goes to everything. All coefficients, all signs in the front, all variables. So the first fraction stays the same. 2r cubed over t cubed. Now let's do the second fraction. The negative on top becomes a positive. The t on top becomes t squared. The 2 in the denominator, 2 squared becomes 4. And the r squared would become r to the 4th. Now we're ready to simplify. So the 2 and the 4. Both coefficients, 2 goes into 4 2 times. Make sure you put that in the denominator or where the bigger number is at. Let's look at r. I have 3 on top, 4 on the bottom, which would leave me with 1 on the bottom. So I'm going to have a 2 and an r in the denominator. Now let's look at the t's. I have 3 in the bottom and 2 on top. That would leave me with 1 in the denominator. Well, what's going to be left in the numerator? Just a 1. If everything cancels out in the numerator, you're left with just a 1. Number 7. We have to distribute the exponent on the outside before we can do our division. Always get in the habit of doing that. That way you don't worry about accidentally shortchanging yourself in the answer. So in the numerator, x squared and then squared again, 2 times 2 is 4. Y would become 6, because 3 times 2 is 6. X would be to the 6, and the y in the denominator, 1 times 2 is 3. Now we can go through and simplify. The first variable, x. Okay, I have 4 on top, 6 on the bottom. 6 wins tug of war because he has 2 more people. So it's an x squared. Now look at the y's. I have 6 on top, 3 on the bottom. So top's going to win because he has 3 more people. So it would be a y cubed in the numerator. Okay, correction on that. The y cubed in the denominator was supposed to be a square. I'm not sure why I wrote down a 3. That means that this should be y to the 4th in the numerator. So make sure you don't, it should be 2 times 1 gives you the y squared. Number 8. Okay, first distribute, then we can go through and divide. Everything inside that set of parentheses gets the exponent. Notice that the top exponent is different from the bottom exponent. So on top, a to the first becomes a squared. B squared becomes b to the 4th. C becomes c squared. Now the denominator. A cubed becomes a to the 9th. B becomes b cubed. And c squared becomes c to the 6th. Notice each time we multiply the exponents, because parentheses to a power, we multiply the powers. Now let's look. First thing I have is a's. A squared, a to the 9th. The 9's going to win because there's 7 more. 9 minus 2 is 7. Now the b's. I have 4 on top, 3 on the bottom. Top's going to win by 1. Now the c's. I have 2 on top, 6 on the bottom. 6 is going to win because we have 4 more players in the denominator. Number 9. Yes, I know, the fractions are exponents. Wow, the fractions are in fractions. So, don't worry about it. we can still do tug of war. Remember, it would be numerator minus denominator. So I would have 1/3 minus 2/3. Can we subtract those fractions? Yes, the denominator's the same. So we would just do 1 minus 2, which is -1. Well, that's easy. Okay, let's go back to our problem. So which one's bigger, top or bottom? Yes, it would be in the denominator, so there's going to be a 1 on top, and I would have 8 to the 1/3. Now we don't put it as a negative because we put it in the denominator. The negative is taken care of. Now if you think back, remember that 1/3? Yeah, that 1/3 is a radical, right? So I have 1 over the root of 8. Now what kind of root is it? Well, the denominator on that exponent is a 3, so it's a cube root. So when we take the cube root of 8, what do we get? We get 2. So the answer is simply 1/2. Isn't that a lot easier than the original problem? That's why we wanted to simplify. Number 10. It's the same thing as number 9. The bases are the same. The exponents are fractions. It doesn't matter. Top minus bottom. So I have 5/3 minus 2/3. Okay, the denominators match, so all I have to do is subtract the numerators. 5 minus 2 is 3. Well, this is entertaining. 3 divided by 3 can be reduced to 1. So this is just 1, right? Now remember that 1 is the exponent, so it's x to the first power. Make sure that you don't just put the exponent down and forget to put the whole problem. So I can write that as a plain old x because we don't have to write exponents of 1. They can be assumed. Number 11. The bases match, 5 and 5. Now look at the exponents. Okay, so they're fractions, no big deal. Top minus bottom. 8 divided by 3 minus 2 divided by 3. Notice I made it easy for you. All the denominators match. So all you have to do is subtract the numerators. 8 minus 2 is 6. Can we reduce that? Yes. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this would become 5 squared, because I'm going to take this 2 and plug it in for the exponent. Now, can we evaluate 5 squared? Yes, we would get 25. That is our answer. Number 12. Well, now we've got 2 variables. That's okay. Let's just look at the x's first. Exponent is 15 over 4 and 3 over 4. So I'm going to do 15 over 4 minus 3 over 4. Alright, well they're both over 4, so all I have to do is 15 minus 3. Well, that's 12. 15 minus 3 is 12. 12 divided by 4 is what? 3. So that means I have an x cubed. That's half my answer. Now let's go in and do the y's. The numerator has a 2 over 5. The denominator has a 7 over 5. So I have 2 over 5 minus 7 over 5. The denominators match. Now do the numerators. 2 minus 7 is 5. Well, this simplifies. 5 divided by 5 is 1, which means I have a y. Oh, it should be negative. Don't forget your negatives. Okay, because the negative tells us what? It's in the denominator. So I have a y with an exponent of 1 in the denominator, which we don't have to write. We could, though, just for good measure. Number 13. This is where most students quit and give up. That's okay. We're just going to let's simplify first. Let's simplify what's inside the parentheses before we distribute that wonderful exponent on the outside. So I'm looking at my a's. I have 5 halves and a 1. Remember, 1 can be expressed with any denominator. So for A, it would be 5 over 2 minus 2 over 2, because 2 over 2 reduces to 1. That would give us what? Well, 5 minus 2 is 3. So A would have an exponent of 3/2. That would be on the top because the exponent is positive and the higher exponent is on the top. So you can check it either way. Now let's look at B's. I have 7 over 4 on top and 11 over 4 on the bottom. So for my B's, I have 7 over 4 minus 11 over 4. Okay. So 7 minus 11 is negative 4. Well, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So my B is to the first power, and it's in the denominator because it had a negative exponent. Now let's look at C's. The numerator has a 1, and the denominator has a 5 over 8. So I'm subtracting 5 over 8. I need to express the 1 with the same denominator. So that would be 8 over 8. Again, denominators are the same, so the denominator stays 8. And 5 minus 8 minus 5 is 3. So the C would be on the numerator and would have an exponent of 3 over 8. Now we're not done yet because we have this wonderful exponent on the outside, 2/3. So we have to distribute the 2/3 to every exponent on the inside and make sure we multiply. Well, the B's the easiest, so I'm going to write him first because 1 times 2/3 is just 2/3. So I know I have a B to the 2/3. Now let's look on top. My A. For my A, notice that the 3's cancel and the 2's cancel. So the whole thing's going to cancel and just leave me with an A to the first power. Now let's look at C. The 3's cancel, so that's gone, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. So C would be 1 over 4. Number 14. Before we distribute the exponent, let's simplify. It's just whole numbers, right? So what is 54 divided by 2? Well, that's going to be 27. So inside the parentheses, I just have a plain old 27. No big deal. Well, we already know that that 27 would go under a radical. The 3 in the denominator comes out front as the value of the radical, and the 5 goes outside the parentheses. So what is the cube root of 27? Or what cubed gives me 27? Would be 3. Now we raise it to the 5th power. So 3 to the 5th power is what? 243. Number 19. It's actually number 15. So let's look at it. The P's. I have 33 over 5 and 63 over 5. So I know I'm going to take 33 minus 63, which is what? That's 30. Okay, it's negative though. So that means the P is going to live where? In the denominator. But that 30 is not the whole thing, right? That 30 is actually over 5. So what is 30 divided by 5? 6. So I have P to the 6th in the denominator. Now let's look at Q. We have Q to what power? 26 and 1/5. So we know we're going to subtract the 1 from 26. That's going to give us 25 over 5. What's 25 divided by 5? 5. So the exponent for the Q is a positive 5, so the Q stays in the numerator with an exponent of positive 5. Number 20. It's technically problem 16, but that's okay. 17 and 153. Well, 17 will actually go into 153 9 times. So I'm going to have a 9 in the denominator. Now let's look at the x's. So I have 15 on top, 11 on the bottom. Who's going to win? Top's going to win because they have, what, 4 more people. Okay, the y's. I have 1 on top, 1 on bottom. They cancel out. No more y's. Now let's look at the z's. I have 1 on top and 3 on bottom. So I'm going to be left with 2 z's in the denominator. But we're not done yet. Remember that fraction? There were parentheses with a 3/2 on the outside. So now we have to distribute that 3/2 to everything inside the parentheses. So let's start on the top with x. Okay, so I have 4 over 1 times 3 over 2. Remember, parentheses to a power, you multiply the powers. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So that becomes x to the 6. 9 to the 3/2. Well, this one might require a little thought. Remember, the half means I'm taking a square root of 9 and then cubing it. Square root of 9 is 3. 3 cubed is 27. Now let's look at z. Z's exponent is 2. So I have 2 over 1 times 3 over 2. The 2's cancel and I'm just left with an exponent of 3. This would be my final answer, and this concludes all the practice for dividing exponents.